It's the role of the Rebbe to use up the days of Yom Tov. It says in Gemara, they need to Shabbos and Yomim Tevim. Yisrael lo lilmod Yom Torah. We have the honor today to have a chosher in Yomam, Harav Achosid, Harav Elimlech, Baakmאן, Rosh Yeshiva, Magid in the Yeshiva in Morristown, New Jersey. Harav Baakmאן, בבקשה.
Okay, so I'll tell you what inspired my thought for today. I was sitting with my son, that was Ben Chumash to Mikra, so I was sitting in during the 3 weeks this past summer, and we were talking about the Beis HaMikdash. So I had those kids' picture books, they open up the kids' picture books and see the pictures of the Beis HaMikdash. After going through it, he was very intrigued. And he asked me, he said, Tati, when you were little, did you get to go to see the Beis HaMikdash? So I said, no, I didn't. So he said, okay, what you're talking about, when he was little, did he get to see the Beis HaMikdash? So I was like, well, Beis HaMikdash was actually broken a long time ago. So he says, how long ago? So I said, I'm not sure. So it made me start to think. So, like any good boy my age, I took out my phone and I went on Google. I tried it in English and I tried it in Hebrew. I said, what year was the Beis HaMikdash? And every English article I opened, every Hebrew article I opened had a different year, which made me start wondering even more what's actually pshat. I can tell you what I found. I can tell you the Hebrew years that I saw was Gimel Alafim Tuf Chav Ches, or Gimel Alafim Tuf Chav Tes, or Gimel Alafim Tuf Lamed. In English, that's called 68 CE, 69 CE, and 70 CE. So I was wondering, okay, so like it only happened once, the second Churban by Hashem. So when was it? So I started doing my homework, and I started from the beginning. I said, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll open up the Chumash. I'll start from the beginning, and I'll try and find out when was the Churban Beis HaMikdash. So I opened up a Chumash Bereshis, and I started counting the years. So I'm not going to bore you from Bereshis. I'll just start with you from Avram Avinu. Okay, so you have the half cup. Take out your calculators. Hopefully I won't make any mistakes. You'll correct me if I did. So I'll start from the year 1948 in Yiddish. It would be Aleph Memches. That's the year that Avraham Avinu was born. Okay, good. So let's start from there. Well, I'll use the English numbers just to make it easier. So the Hebrew year of the year 1948. So we know the Chumash tells us that Avraham Avinu, when he was 100 years old, 100 years old. That's when he gave birth to Yitzchak, right? So we're told he now 2048. Okay, beautiful. How old was Yitzchak when he had Yaakov? 60, right? He was 60 years old. Beautiful. So now we're holding 2,108. Beautiful. And we know that we know when Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, right away he had his, Yosef brought him into the palace to go meet with Pari. And Pari says, how old are you? He says, don't judge me by my looks, but I'm 130 years old. Okay, beautiful. How long were they even in Mitzrayim? So we know if we go back and rewind a little bit, back to when Avraham Avinu, when he was a little bit younger, Avraham Avinu, the Eibishter told him, I have bad news to you, that you're going to go into Gullus. For how long? 400 years. How do you count 400 years? Great question. So, we're not going to go into all the different ways. We'll go with simple Pashut Pshat of Rashi and Chumash. So Rashi, if you open up a Chumash, Parshas Boy, open up Rashi. Rashi tells us, because the pasuk over there actually says that the Yidden were in time for 430 years. Okay? The Brisbane started, the Eibishter said 400 years. No worries. So Rashi clarifies the view, and he says, listen, how old was Avraham Avinu by the Brisbane of Sodom? Avraham Avinu was 70 years old. So from when Avraham Avinu was told by the Eibishter that Ger years Aracham, the Eretz Lehem, that was 430 years from when Avraham Avinu was told this by the Eibishter. 430 years later was Yitzias Mitzrayim. What's the cheshbon? With me. So what's the cheshbon of 400 years? Let's actually go with that. What's the cheshbon of 400 years? The pasuk in Parashat Boy says 430 years. So let's fast forward 30 years later, when Avraham Avinu was 100 years old, that's when he had Yitzchak. So Rashi tells us Well, the 400 years could only really start once Yitzchak was born, because the pasuk says that Ger Yezarach, your descendants will be in a foreign land. Beautiful, no worries. So the Eibishter, when he said 400 years, he meant from when Yitzchak was born. Okay, so 430 from when Avram Avinu was notified, 400 from when there was a Zaracha to be in a foreign land. Rashi tells us Lav Dafka was talking specifically about Mitzrayim. 400 years in a foreign land, all the different things. How long were they actually in Mitzrayim for? Well, let's do the math. We know that what I just told you was that they were actually from the time, we count from the time of Yitzchak until Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is 400 years. So do the math. Yitzchak was born. 6 years later, Yaakov Avinu was born. Yaakov Avinu was 130 when they came down to Mitzrayim. It's 190. 400 minus 190, beautiful, 210 years. That's why we always say that the actual amount of years, even we're in Mitzrayim, we're 210 years. Okay, I didn't confuse you yet with the math. It's going to get worse. So, good. Now we're holding by Yitzias Mitzrayim. The year that everyone always talks about is the year 2448. Okay? 2448 was Yitzias Mitzrayim, was Monntereol, so all the big exciting things happened in Chodesh Nisan, and then later Monntereol in the year 2448. Okay, good. Fast forward another 40 years. Another 40 years, because even we're in the Midbar for 40 years, so we're holding now 2488. Okay, beautiful. Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael in the year 2488. Okay, so this you'll have to trust me also, that from the time that Yeshua took the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael until the Yidden were exiled from Eretz Yisrael by the time of Nebuchadnezzar was 850 years. What's the cheshbon? Well, by the time they entered Eretz Yisrael and divided up the land, until they actually built the Beis HaMikdash was 440 years. And then the first Beis HaMikdash stood for 410 years, the Gemara says. So 850 years later, that's when the Churban Bayis Rishon happened. Easy way to remember, Gimel Shlach 3338. That's 850 years after the year 2488, when the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael. So exactly 8, yeah? I hope I got the math right. 2488 plus 850 takes you to the year Gimel Alachim Shin Lamed Ches 338. 3338. Beautiful. So now we're holding by the Churban Bayis Rishon. Okay, we know that it says that the Nevi'im told us that the Churban was going to happen. There was going to be 70 years of Galus Bava. Okay? That's also tricky. We all know the whole story of Purim. How do you count 70 years? Well, we could go through all the wrong ways of counting it. We have Belshazzar's way of counting it. What was Belshazzar's cheshbon? Belshazzar's cheshbon was that he thought it was 70 years of Malchus Bava. So do the math. We know that Nebuchadnezzar was melech for 43 years. Nebuchadnezzar's son, Elimelech, was a king for 43 years plus 25 years, I believe. 25 years, 43 plus 25, that takes you to 68. Beautiful. So when Elimelech's son, Belshazzar, Vashi Yisati, when he became melech by second year of his melucha, he said, oh, like 7 years are up, so he started making a party, right? That was the second year. Oh, he didn't actually make the party in his second year, because Farti was still a little bit nervous. He said, let's wait till next year. By the third year of his melucha. Third year of his melucha, he wanted to wait. The Mepharshim say he wanted to wait, according to many Midrashim, he wanted to wait till Chodesh Nisan, because he was still superstitious, you know. The Nisan Asidim Ligo, the Yidden are going to get taken out of Golas in Nisan. So he said, let's wait till Nisan. Comes Nisan and the Yidden don't get taken out of Golas, I'll throw a party. So Chodesh Nisan, in that year, according to his cheshbon, which was 70 years, he threw a party. Beautiful. So according to some Mefarshim, actually, his party was on Leil Aleph to Pesach. And that's when he was killed. On Leil Aleph to Pesach. Belshazzar. Other people say different things, but let's go with that Aleph to Pesach. Okay. What was wrong with his cheshbon of 70 years? The Navi said 70 years. What was his problem? So the Gemara in Megillah tells us, we all know the Gemara, tells us that you're not supposed to be counting Malchus Bava, you're supposed to be counting Galus Bava. Right? So Nebuchadnezzar became melech in the year 3319. Gimel Alachim Shin Yud Tes, which would be 43 years plus 43 plus the 25 plus the 2 years of Belshazzar. Beautiful. But his problem was you weren't supposed to count Malchus Bava, you're supposed to count Galus Bava. When was Galus Bava? Not in Gimel Alachim Shin Yud Tes when Nebuchadnezzar became melech, but 8 years later when Yechoniah melech was sent into Galus. 8 years later. So you have to just add 8 years. So according to his cheshbon, Achashverosh's cheshbon, Belshazzar messed up. Achashverosh and Haman's cheshbon was, Belshazzar messed up by 8 years, no problem. So Haman and Achashverosh sat down and had their meetings, and they said we have to add on 8 years to Belshazzar's cheshbon. What's the 8 years we have to add on? Well, there's the extra year of Belshazzar that he did for superstition, plus add another 7 years. Beautiful. What was the cheshbon of the 7 years? The Gemara Megillah tells us that after Belshazzar was killed, who took over? The Malchus Molei Poras, which was Daryavish the first, and Kodesh and Sunlap. Daryavish took over in the year 3389. He only was Melech for a year in 3390. Kodesh and Sunlap took over. 2 years later, he went, and then Achashverosh took over. Right? Fast forward 3 years, then the whole Purim story, Shnas Sholish Lamalchai, 3395, that's when we start to know from the Megillah, 3395, Shnas Sholish Lamalchai, lovely. And that year, according to his cheshbon, it was 70. Why? Because again, he just had to add 8 years onto the cheshbon of Belshazzar. What was Belshazzar's cheshbon? Belshazzar's cheshbon was that it was Malchus Bavel, but you had to add on, get to start from Gimel and Shin Chav Zayin, 8 years later. So he said, what's the 8 years? The extra year of, what's his name? Belshazzar, thank you. Extra year of Belshazzar, plus his cheshbon, plus 2 years of Daryavish the first, plus 3 years of Kodesh, plus 2 years of Achashverosh. That's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2. Beautiful, that's 8, right? 3, 2. Yes, that's 8 years. Beautiful, that was his cheshbon. Now, what was wrong with that? What's wrong with the cheshbon? 3, 2, 2. Yeah, I got that right, right? That was 8. What was wrong with the cheshbon? The Gemara tells us that his problem was in his counting. Because in his counting, additionally, he counted for Kodesh, he counted 2 years. But Kodesh was not king for 2 years. He was closer to 1 year, a little over 1 year. Daryavish the first was a little more than 1 year. And Kodesh was a little more than 2 years. So really together it was like 3 years. He counted as 5 years. So even according to his faulty cheshbon of 70 years, he was also wrong. What was the real cheshbon? The real cheshbon Amiti was supposed to be from actual Golos Babel from 3338 Gimel Shlach. Beautiful. So let's fast forward. Let's now forget about the wrong cheshbonis of Belshazzar, Achashverosh, Haman, all those guys, and we'll move on because we don't have too much time. So we'll move on to the actual cheshbon. 70 years later, we're talking now. The Eden got sent out of Eretz Yisrael in Gimel Shlach 3338. Takes it to the year 3408. What happened in the year 3408? A little less well known. Shortly after the story of Purim, Achashverosh met his end. I don't know how he died. Maybe he died of old age. I don't know how he died. But shortly, a year or so after the Purim story, Achashverosh passed away. And then who took over? His baby son, who according to most people would be Esther's child. How old was he? Good question. It's also a debate. Some people like to say he was 2 years old. Some people say he was 7 years old, depending on when exactly Esther became pregnant. Long story short, Esther wasn't in the palace for more than 7 years. So if Esther was the real mother, then the baby could not have been older than 7 years old. Some people say he was younger, but max 7 years old. Beautiful. So we're holding down the year 3408. 3408. That's when Daryavish II gave Rishus to build the Bayit Sheni. Beautiful. We know the Gemara tells us. How long the second Beis HaMikdash stand? Second Beis HaMikdash stood for much longer than the first one. The first one was only 410. The second Beis HaMikdash was 420. Beautiful. So count 3408 plus 420, which will take you to 3828. Right? We were holding 3408, so add 420. So it takes you to 3828. In Hebrew terms, that's Gimel Lafim Taf Taf Chaf Ches. In English terms, that's called 68 CE. So I after doing that homework, I said, okay, fine. So what's up with all these other Google searches that some guys said 68 CE, 69 So I just made the cheshbon, 68, problem solved. Okay, then I realized I didn't invent the wheel, so I went searching a little bit more. And I opened up a Gemara, and I realized that much wiser and smarter people have discussed this much more before me. The machlekes Rashi and Taisus. The question is, how do you count 420 years? Rashi in Masechtas Avodah Zarah says, well, we know that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, right? Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, right? So however you're going to slice it, it was not 420 full years. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in the month of Av, which is just shy of the end of the year. So great. So how do you count 420? 420 plus 10 months, or 419 plus 10 months? How do you count 420? Beautiful. Like it's Rashi thesis. So Rashi and others who follow will say that it was 419 and 10 months, which would take you to my cheshbon of 3828, 68 CE in Lahavdil Geisha terminologies. Tosfos right there says, with all due respect to Rashi over here in Masechta Zona, but I believe differently, and as a matter of fact, I believe that Rashi also changed his mind in another Masechta, and I think actually the going, and this is the way most Mefarshim, I can say that, most Mefarshim are going to learn it, that actually it was 420 years plus 10 months, which would mean that actually the Churban Bayis happened in the year 3829, which is the equivalent as the Goyim would call 69 CE. Okay, fine. So I said, okay, fine. So I got so far. So what's with the 70 CE? I go on Wikipedia and I type in Wikipedia, when was the Jewish temple destroyed? They say 70 CE. So I'm like, okay, I can't trust the Goyim, but where did they get this from? Who made it up? So I went searching a little bit more. And I continue learning those Gemaras, and the Gemara says another thing. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it says, the year after Shemitah. Beautiful. I know Shemitah. I know what Shemitah was. We just had Shemitah, right? Hakel, everyone always talks about it. We just had Tavshin Pei Beis was a Shemitah year, right? So, no problem. I took out my calculator and I said, okay, fine. I'll rewind divisibles of 7 to rewind all the way back to find out which year was the year after a Shemitah year. So I took out my calculator and I multiplied 7 times 279, I'm sorry. 7 times 279, and I came to the cheshbon of 1953, which took me back to which year? 2829, which is Shemitah year, which stressed me out because, hold on one second, the Gemara says that the Churban happened the year after Shemitah, which would mean 70. Okay, fine, no problem. So that could fit with Wikipedia. So Baruch Hashem, Wikipedia was right, but how does that fit with everything we just discussed? Okay, so then I opened up a little bit more, and I realized that really we didn't even know how to count. Okay, the question is, how do we count? Okay, there's an age-old question on how we're actually supposed to count, right? Because Torah, we know Torah isn't recording really history of the world and stuff. Torah is recording people's lives, right? Adam lived this many years, Mishushev lived this many years. Good, add it all together and you'll know what year you're holding it. How do we count? Before I tell you how we count, actually, I asked someone, I said, what year was the world created? He's like, trick question. When was the world created? World 0, right? Every baby's born at 0. No problem, baby was born at 0. Okay, fine. The world was created Aleph Tishrei, right? No, the world was created Chav Ha'el. I said, okay, no problem. Okay, so Adam Rishon was created Aleph Tishrei in the year 0. Okay, what year was Erev Rosh Hashanah? Okay, no, quick. So, my mistake. Adam Rishon was really created in year 1. The world was created in year 0. No problem, the first year had 5 days. That's okay. The first year of the world had 5 days, so we move on to this year number 2, started 6 days later. Fantastic. So beautiful. Now, you have to realize whenever you come into the cheshbonos of Torah versus our terminologies, you'll always have to realize that there's always going to be a discrepancy. Why? Because Torah doesn't speak in years of the world. We speak in terminologies of years of the world. How long since the Abishur King created the world? How long ago? That's what we want to know. Torah doesn't really care about that. Torah wants to know how long each individual person lived. You'll be able to cheshbon in the world afterwards. So therefore, I think pull the mic out of my hand. But I think that it should relieve some stress from this discussion, at least, to say that if the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in the cheshbon of the Shas, Talmud Bavli, and all the other Mefarshim, then we could say that the Churban Bayis happened in their terminologies in the year 3829, which we would call in our cheshbon of, we're us counting from the beginning of B'riyas HaElemus, would be the year 3830, because again, whatever Torah says, we just add +1, because we started the cheshbon a year earlier. I'll end off with one last thing, unless I have to get in the mic, but I'll end off with one last thing, that I opened up a sikha also, because I was learning a little while ago some sichas in Tafshim Memches. So Tafshim Memches, there was a sicha, Parshas Tetzaveh, and that was speaking about Matan Torah. And that was saying, oh, it's 3,300 years since Matan Torah. Because Matan Torah happened 2448, now we're holding in 5748. So that was at 3,300 years. That was said, but it's not actually 3,300 years. Why? And that says, because of the discrepancy of Torah years versus our years. In addition to that, that actually says not only there's a 1 year discrepancy, there's a 2 year discrepancy. Why is there a 2 year discrepancy? Because when you say, when we say in Torah, for example, Adam Rishon passed away at 100 years, whatever it was, 970 years old. That means he was in his 971st year. And so therefore, when we say he lived 970 years, he was 970 plus 1. Huh? 930. Whatever. Yeah, thank you. 930 plus 1. So he passed away in his 931st year. So that means, what was it on the calendar, if you could ask? He died at 930, and the calendar said 931. Because whatever you say for a human, you always start the beginning of the year. You always count at the end of the year. As opposed to the world, you start from the beginning of the year. So we're going to have a two-year discrepancy. There's a lot more, but we have to remind it. Shkoyach, thank you for the opportunity.
The Rebbe said that everything ends with a ches. That's sicher. Yeah. Taylor was with a ches.
Rebbe says, even though it wasn't actually.
No, that's in sicher. The Rebbe said that everything ends with a ches. By your shady, talk of ches.
Right. Correct.
Shkoyach Elimlech, thank you very much. The Kינוס will continue tomorrow. Everybody is asked to make sure to be on time.